This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And I am thrilled to be here this beautiful Friday morning. I love when I don't have to drive through rain.
Yeah, yes.
You know,
and
there's
boy,
a lot,
did we have it.
There's a lot to be, well, we needed it.
Yes, we did.
And we still do. So,
yeah, well, we'll get back into a little rain this weekend.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, sure.
All right. Hang on one second. I am sharing to me. I love this about technology. I share to me. All right. Anyway. So, yeah, it's a gorgeous day. And I was thinking of a couple of different things. And either one of which is actually a controversial subject. I was listening to Ask a Lawyer, Stewart's show, as I always do on my way in.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, obviously, the form of government that we have with three branches that are designed to check and balance each other. And, of course, the Senate is modeled after the House of Lords in the British system, because it was the system we really knew. And the House of Commons is our Congress, is our House of Representatives. So they didn't stray far. The biggest difference, obviously, is the king versus the president. And you might wonder where that idea might have come from. I don't know, because I wasn't there. And but I'm wondering if that might have come, and here's the piece that some people might be surprised, because George Washington was part of the Masonic Lodge in Virginia.
Whoa, okay.
He was a Mason. And Masons elect every year their worshipful master, who serves for 1 year and then goes back into the community, if you will. And so the transition of power is very peaceful within the lodge, and it changes every year. There's a new worshipful master, which is akin to a president. It's not the title that's used, but it's worshipful master. Why worshipful? Not because they worship him, but because worshipful was a title that was commonly used in England when the Masonic fraternity first got its start.
Wow.
Okay, so
bombshell.
There's a piece that a lot of people may or may not know. There's a ton of pieces that people, I think, don't begin to get about Masons. The idea is that it's a secret society. No, it's not. They've got driver's license plates, they've got license plates that identify them, that have the square and compasses on the license plate. It's one of the vanity license plates available through Florida, and other states have Masonic licenses and things like that are available. There's all kinds of jewelry that Masons typically might or might not wear. There are ties that identify them with the square and compasses again. So it's not a secret society, and the lodge in Fort Pierce is on Oleander, and it's got a great big sign out that says Masonic Lodge.
Sure.
And it's also, interestingly, on Treasure Coast Hospice has a sign as you go in that says dedicated by the Masons. They did it's right by the front door when you walk in.
I've never noticed that.
Most people don't. And the lodge in Stewart is on Osceola, right near the Circle.
Yes.
Again, and that building's been there since a long time ago. All right, so Masonic lodges have been around for a very, very long time, and they model how to vote on things, and they model a peaceful transition of power. And we know that, because they've said so, a number of the founding fathers were in fact members of various different lodges in different colonies. at the time. And so they did have a model for peaceful transition of power. The idea being that being a worshipful master is a ton of hard work. I'm not a Mason. Masons are males in most cases. And that's... There's a fight whether or not women can or cannot be. In some states there are female lodges. That actually started in France. They started a women's lodge. Time will tell where that goes or doesn't go. And the biggest American lodge of women is in D.C. And those are democratic voting bodies. Anybody who's a member of that lodge votes for what goes on in that lodge. And anybody who's the Grand Lodge, which is the state organization that oversees all of the local chapters, much like any other Masonic type of, or any other fraternal type of organization. So it's not a secret organization. I don't know any Mason who would deny being a Mason. Now, there were times when people were chased for being Masons. Hitler hated them, with good reason.
He hated everybody.
Yeah.
Someone else's.
Well, and because there was a fight with with European lodges and Germany over the admission of Jews into the lodge, because you can be any faith tradition and be a Mason. The only thing that you have to do, and you're looking at me because you're Catholic. We'll talk about that too. Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. You're thinking Knights of Columbus, and there's a great joke that says, there was a basketball game between the Masons and the Knights of Columbus, and we can't tell you who won because it's a secret. Yeah. So it is an organization that has secrets. What are the secrets? The modes of recognitions whereby they know that another person is in fact a member of a lodge. So that's what's the secret. It's protected by copyright law.
Wait a minute.
It's in a book in Congress. If you go in the right places, you can actually find it.
Oh my!
It's copyrighted.
It's copyrighted. Okay.
And as such, they have the right to reserve how it's used. So it can't be copied for any reason, which is why there's not a million copies of it. Not that there aren't. I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff out there on YouTube. I haven't really researched it. And as I said, I'm not a Mason. My brother is a Mason. One of my brothers, my surviving brother. I've got 1 out of 3 left. So he is a Mason and has been a Mason, I don't know, tons and tons of years. He was a Mason before he went to Vietnam, and he's a Vietnam-era vet.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Wow. Yeah.
But you're right. You gave me the look. Because the
We're not welcome.
Catholics, Catholics split off. It's not. I'm not sure if it's that Catholics are not welcome, or that Catholics unwelcomed themselves. I don't know. Again, I wasn't there.
That's a possibility too.
I wasn't. There were times in history when different religious groups had trouble praying with others. Right. We don't always pray in the sandbox well. And yes, I'm purposely saying pray. And not that...
It's still the same way.
So a lodge is not a church, is not designed to be a substitute for a church. Lodge members are... And I know a good number of Masons in the Treasure Coast area. I knew a good number of lodges in the Tucson area. My congregation in Tucson actually met for a number of years at Tucson Lodge number 4. Even when they moved to their new building. We were in their old building. We moved with them to their new building, and then we moved to the shrine in downtown Tucson. I think it was the Shrine Temple. I'm getting a little fuzzy there, but it was a beautiful, beautiful old building in Tucson, about 2 or 3 blocks from the oldest synagogue in Tucson, in Arizona Territory, actually, the old Stone Avenue Temple.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and it got restored, and it's a beautiful museum now, and you can go and see a lot about the history of Tucson, particularly the Jewish history, but the history of Tucson, because you can't separate one from the other. Jews in Tucson were very, very active in the founding of the city and the establishment of that trade area. It was useful for them, too, because they were business people for the most part, the Jews that came to Tucson. So, anyway, so my familiarity, comes from those connections. And the people that I know, there are Jews who are Masons, there are Catholics that are Masons, there are all manner of Protestants, there are Hindus, there are all different varieties of... The only requirement is that you believe in a supreme being. And after that, it's pretty wide open. There are some lodges. The one in Tucson, I know, had on its altar, it has an altar that's the center of the room and used for ritual purposes, which is mostly the opening and closing of the meetings. And they had on that altar a Christian Bible, a Hebrew Bible, a Jewish Bible, and a Quran. Because of the members of the lodge having their sacred scripture on that altar.
Interesting.
Because Masonically, all of them are sacred story, which they are. That's a valid, reasonable approach. And so Masons are typically disliked by people who don't like open democratic. And I say open even though it's an organization with secrets, because once you're a member, then it's wide open to the membership, which that's their right. It's okay to have a membership organization.
Of course, we know there are no secrets in the Catholic Church.
We're not going there. We're not going anywhere close to that. So, again, back to it. Some of the ideas of moral life, of treating people kindly, not saying unjust things, not giving in to gossip and garbage like that, and being fair with people, those are some of the things that are espoused.
And that's common sense stuff.
Yeah. It is. And it's worth noting, one of the people who actually used to come to the Bible studies that we conducted in the lodge with our synagogue, we did most of them in the library or in the social hall, just depending on size and number of people. But one of the people who used to come to those quite often was the secretary of the lodge. And so we often had a number of discussions because the Masonic tradition and I am familiar with Eastern Star, and I'm a little bit familiar with Amaranth and a couple of the other pendant bodies, they're called. They're organizations where the women are in charge, which is Nile and Amaranth and Eastern Star. Those are different fraternal organizations for women. My mouth is not working today. So I am familiar with those to some extent. And the lessons, the teaching, the guidance is all about doing good things. The Masonic organizations run a number of hospitals, make significant donations to things like diabetes, hearing. That's a big thing.
Well, the Shriners are Masons.
Yeah, the Shriners are Masons. Yeah. And there's a lot of organizations that go on alongside with the Masons. They actually have the registration of all of the time capsules. They are the keeper of the time capsules in the U.S. So if you put a time capsule in when you dedicate a building, which is, I'm guessing, why it's on Treasure Coast. There's probably a capsule there because of the Masonic emblem. At Stone Avenue Temple, when it was built in 1910, they had a time capsule put in the cornerstone of the building. The Masons had the registration. They knew approximately where in the building it was. Drawings have a way of shifting over time. And in 2010, interestingly, Gabby Giffords was actually there at the ceremony when the Masons pulled off the plate and opened that time capsule. And then a year later, a replacement was put in. Before 2010 was over, a replacement capsule went in to be opened in 2110.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it is interesting. There were things that were brought out of that capsule. We got to see them because they opened them right there in the middle of the crowd, and it was a huge crowd. And as I said, Gabby Giffords was one of the people in attendance because at the time she was the representative from Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
She was the congresswoman, and that's where she was shot, was at a Meet Your Congressman or Meet Your Congressperson event held at a parking lot in front of a supermarket. Yeah, not a place you'd normally expect violence to erupt, but that's a whole nother news story. Anyway, so yeah, they opened up the time capsule, and we got to see, there was a newspaper in it that said that the state had just approved, the colony had just voted to join and had asked for statehood, because that's the way that it's done, is this first the colony or the territory or whatever votes to become a state in the Union. Arizona, of course, was the last one and joined in February of, I think, 1914, I want to say. Somewhere around there.
Yeah. New Mexico was
right before it. Yeah, it was right
yeah.
before it. Arizona was the last one, and it was in February that it finally became official. But in 1910, that gives you an idea of how long it took to do things.
And Texas is still waiting to become a state.
Texas is waiting to become its own. Never mind. Anyway, half of the trip between Tucson and Port St. Lucie is in Texas.
Yes. Oh, at least
888 miles.
Oh, you've logged it?
Well, the mile marker said that was we left Texas.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And we started at mile marker 0, so...
there you go.
Got it. Long time in Texas.
Yep.
A lot of different terrains, a lot of different climates. It was interesting. Different systems, ecosystems. That at least changed as we crossed the state, but it's a huge... When you come from Arizona across the I-10, it's a long trip.
And there's not much out there.
No, there's a lot of farms and ranch land.
I've driven it about 5 times, so yeah, I know it well.
I drove it 3 times in the move out here.
There you go.
Drove my car out, which decided to have a blowout on the tire before we even left Arizona. We were barely 80 miles out of Tucson, right before the New Mexico border, when one of my tires went to the tire heaven in earth, above earth.
There was one of the Arizona gods up there saying, "Don't you leave."
I understand. I have a T-shirt from the gas station that changed the tire. They did a beautiful job. I'm very, very grateful for that, because it was in the middle of nowhere. Thank God we were not that far from a gas station.
Wow.
Yeah. And he backed up with the police up the exit ramp, because I had drifted off to the exit. I was able to safely get off the highway and get on the exit ramp in the drift down. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. That alone could take this entire hour, because it took hours to get it done, get back on the road. Changed the timing of the trip, and we arrived here in Port St. Lucie a little later than I had hoped to. But we still got our requisite rest and things like that on the way.
There you go. That's good.
So, Texas, Arizona lodges. So the time capsule said that Arizona had voted, the people in Arizona had voted to become a state, which was a big thing, because there was a chance that it could have become part of Mexico.
Oh, sure.
There was a huge dispute, and a lot of Mexicans lived in the Arizona colony or territory. So it wasn't quite as easy as people might think. There was a big dispute. There was an argument about where and how the border was going to be drawn. All of that obviously resolved finally, and it became the 48th state, the last of the contiguous, which means touching each other, states in the continent of the United States of America. In the continent of America, in the country, United States of America. And then obviously later added Hawaii and Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's Alaska and Hawaii. If we...
Hawaii.
My history professor.
Hawaii is
Hawaii.
the 50th.
Yep.
Hawaii, yes.
And I've been there, and it is a beautiful, beautiful state.
Yeah, our favorite island is Kauai.
Never made it to Kauai.
Home of the Grand Canyon of the Pacific. And it is, the colors out there are just mind-boggling.
That's amazing for somebody who's from Tucson.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Although I have a friend who lives in Sedona, and
that's a whole different
that
world.
has the colors and the formations. And her comment used to be, "Well, God may have made the Grand Canyon, but God lives in Sedona."
Yeah. Or the other close second would be Monument Valley.
There's some gorgeous. Zion Park is amazing too. Some gorgeous real estate in the U.S. So, and those are well worth the trip and the visit, folks. Yeah. It's so here's a trivia piece that a lot of people may not realize. There's a Jewish cemetery in Tombstone, Arizona.
I've been to the Tombstone Cemetery. Really?
Yeah. If you go to the back of it and down around a little bend, it'll take you to the Jewish cemetery.
Oh, wow.
At the sign when you go into the cemetery, it tells you there that the Jewish cemetery is down the road a piece.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. It's an interesting monument. People, if they visit Tombstone, should take a few minutes and go down and look at it and see what's there. It's an interesting. You come around the bend, if you will, and you see it. So it's well worth a visit. It's a humorous not the Jewish one, but the Tombstone Cemetery's got a lot of funny parts in it. I think they do some humorous tours and guided walks and things.
Yeah. It's a neat little place.
That was definitely a Wild West town, and it's still fun to visit because they kind of set it up in that theme. A lot of the restaurants and stores are geared for tourism.
Ironically, when we were looking at buying WPSL, the other option was a station at Fort Huachuca.
Ah, okay.
And we know that area very, very well, and beautiful part of the world. It's just, the problems that we have at that border now are just terrible.
And they've been exacerbated. They
have.
They've been brought way out of what they would have been, could have been, should have been. And people are irritating each other and purposely raising the tension. There's a whole lot of stuff that people have no idea about. Yes, there's garbage coming in drug cartels and things like that. But that really has nothing to do with the wall, folks. They're coming in differently. Mm-hmm. And
you look at we were watching on CNBC the other night this drug tunnel that almost looked like a superhighway underpass that was totally constructed going into Tijuana.
Yeah.
Or from Tijuana to San Ysidro. And it's like, you've got to be kidding. And there was a little rail car that they would use, and it's like, my goodness. Yeah, it must have taken years to build.
The best defense we would have against that would be legalizing the drugs.
Ooh, that's libertarian.
Yeah. Well, other countries actually do that. And, it's okay to arrest people who operate equipment, including cars, airplanes, boats, under the influence, because that's being irresponsible, and those are licensed activities.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly, there's lots of, you say, oh my gosh, how can you make a crime legal? Let's look at Las Vegas, folks. Prostitution is a legal, honorable profession, which takes it out of the back alley, and it affords the clientele clean sheets, health inspections of the workers, and it gives them some benefits too.
And gambling.
Gambling is legal there too. Gambling is legal on reservations if they so vote. We can legalize many things. The thing that makes it profitable for the cartels is the criminality, which raises the price of the goods.
The black market side.
The black markets.
Yeah.
If you unblack the market, Plus, it also would empty out the prisons.
Oh.
and make it easier and more open to get treatment for addictions. Yeah, we should have learned from Prohibition that restricting substances doesn't work. Making it illegal only gives the bootleggers a profit and makes it criminal. It's much better to make it legal and regulate it.
And of course, if you're in California, tax it. Oh,
anywhere taxes.
Yes.
And I don't know how much prostitution is or isn't taxed, or gambling is or isn't taxed. Yeah.
You know, I've never noticed. Of course, I haven't won that much when I was working.
Oh, if you
in
win,
Vegas.
they're going to file a report, and you better file your income tax.
That's
on
the
it.
IRS. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You bet.
In fact, that's usually what they get racketeers on, is tax evasion.
Well, but most of the time, if you win like a good sum in a casino, you pay the IRS at that window.
Well, because they're not going to chase you.
They want it first.
They want it first. And they have the power to do that because
Yes.
it comes out of that central. Same thing is true if you take money out of an IRA or a 401k, you pay the tax first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get your paycheck, guess what? You've paid your taxes first. That's why we file for refunds, most of us, or at least certainly me.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So the government always gets its cut. And we need to pay taxes. The argument with England wasn't taxes, it was taxation without representation. It was the not having a say on whether or not a particular item could, should, or would be taxed and how much. And I don't know how differently we would have been taxed as a colony if the colonies had had a voice. We can also look now to things like Puerto Rico, right? It's a U.S. territory. Do they have a say in how and what they're taxed? Now, they do for the Puerto Rican sales tax and things like that. But how much say do they have? Because they don't have a lot of vote.
Boy, and they're treated so shabbily.
They are. They really
They
are.
really are.
As our other American territories.
Mm-hmm.
We do not treat any of our people. Most people have no idea of how many territories we do or don't have. Challenge any history professor, give a call, or any civics person who can tell us the answers to that, because I don't know it off the top of my head.
They still teach civics?
They do teach it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So here was an interesting piece, though. I was talking with some of my students yesterday. Yeah, yesterday was Thursday. With some of my students, and I commented about China. We were talking about Chinese government, and we were talking about gender roles. Because gender roles in America are one thing. They're different in South America. They're different in Europe, and they're different in China and elsewhere. So we were talking about gender roles and how gender roles play into societies. And one of the things that some people don't realize is that China did have a woman empress who founded a dynasty, Wu Zetian. And not that she was a nice person. Many emperors were not nice people. I don't think she would have qualified for that, but her rule was a period of peace and harmony where people had ample food, and one of the things that she did very well was that she promoted people according to merit, not according to who your genes came from.
Not cronyism?
Not cronyism. And merit always provides a better performance.
In theory, yeah. Yeah, you bet.
You're lucky if cronyism works. Cronyism is about serving the person in power who has the ability to make those appointments, whereas promoting by merit puts the country or the state in the forefront. Who benefits? That's always the question. It's the version of follow the money.
So what do the students have to say?
Well, they were quite surprised because in America, we don't teach Chinese history. China's this great, big, huge, largest country on the planet. Land mass, huge. Density along the cities, along the coast, incredibly high. And we know almost nothing about it in American high schools.
Well, and likewise with India, it had.
India's a second. Yeah.
I didn't know anything about India until I met Carol, and she had all these books, from Pakistan, which were Pakistan.
Yeah,
and
Pakistan and India were once one country.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Another
and
highly
Bangladesh. That was all. Yeah.
Other highly populated areas and. Oh, there's so much stuff going on in the rest of the world. We really don't even learn much about Russia in world history in America. And then Africa is this, black box country that we know almost nothing about. The only thing we know about Australia, for the most part, is that it was a prison colony. We don't learn where the indigenous people of the Aborigines come from. We don't learn the things that happen. It's not that long ago that Australia stopped taking children from their parents of the families of Aboriginal children, Aboriginal families stealing children. The lost generation, the lost kids.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still, the government of Australia finally apologized a few years ago. It's not nearly enough, and it's almost impossible to repair the damage that was done by civilizing and educating the Aboriginal children.
Yeah.
And they're now scrambling hard to try to capture some of the oral history. Because what they did is they broke the link from grandparent to grandchild for the transmission of the sacred stories. And
we saw the same thing. Well, 60 Minutes had this massive piece on what various schools had done to the Indians
in America,
in the U.S.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same in Canada. And up there, they were Catholic schools that.
No offense, sir. It very often was Catholic schools.
I know. They said that they were trying to civilize people.
Tried to justify it instead of acknowledging that they had a viable working society.
Yeah.
They were not broken, folks, when the missionaries arrived. They were not broken. The missionaries broke them, but they were not broken before. And just because you can doesn't mean you have a right to. Hey, she can get herself in trouble.
Oh, no. It's so true. Yeah. I mean, there were stories that came out about Father Sarah and his friends that were mortifying.
The number of Aboriginals that were killed in the name of civilization is
staggering. It got to be staggering.
Oh, just horrific. And, I don't know how, just as I said with Australia, I don't know what they can do. They can't repair that damage. Thank God they've at least apologized. It's a step in the right direction. It's a pitifully small step, but it's at least a step. Stopping the behavior, obviously, is a big key of it. They've got a long way to go with discrimination and other systemic abuses of Aboriginal people. In Hawaii.
Oh.
The Hawaiian people.
Yeah.
Just now, we're starting to collect some of it. COVID, of course, interfered with a lot of things. The Merry Monarch Festival, speaking of Hawaii, that's well worth looking at and seeing the Aboriginal dances and sacred story and how they talk about it. There's some incredible, wonderful people that tell those stories. And some of it has fortunately been recorded. So we've got some. But we're losing. Every day we lose bits and pieces. We always will.
Yeah, and there are some pure Hawaiian communities that they don't want us haoles hanging around.
Oh.
And rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
We don't have a good track record.
No, we don't.
We just don't. Would that people could understand. And that was part of the other point that I was trying to make with my students, which is that there are many different societies and cultures, and how gender roles are defined is very different. It's not that it's the same in every culture. It's not. There's at one time in America there were 5 genders recognized, not 2. The other controversial subject I was debating on talking about today, LGBTQ.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so there's Two-Spirit in a lot of American Indian communities. There are people who are recognized as being Two-Spirit. That is having significant elements of feminine and masculine desires, skills, qualities. And they look at the Two-Spirit as having, in some ways, much more knowledge because they understand bits and pieces of both, quote-unquote, both sides. Of those who are extremely female or extremely male, or masculine or extremely feminine. Two-Spirit encompasses a lot of different places. The Book of Esther has multiple genders in it. But you have
going that far back.
Going that far back. It's not new, folks. And it's not limited to human beings. Animals have it as well. And to not recognize it as part of the human spectrum is to disavow part of our humanity. God made us, if we take the religious side and say God made us, then God made us with all of this wonderful diversity. You know that I love plants and I love growing things. And I was looking at propagating magnolias. It's interesting because there's a couple of magnolia trees that right now have their little clusters that will someday turn into seed pockets. And magnolias have to be planted moist. You cannot allow the seed to dry out. It has to winter, which is probably why there are not 5 million magnolia trees in the world, because there are so many things that have to happen for that seed to properly germinate. And you take that and you compare it to, say, a Mexican bird of paradise or a pride of Barbados that has to dry out and then be remoistened because it has acclimated to the desert with the monsoons.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to do with how the plant, what environment the plant lives in. Look at how diverse the plant kingdom is. And then look at all the different butterflies. Look at all the different dragonflies. Look at all the different people. We are meant to be very, very diversified. We are meant to be on a spectrum of some sort. God didn't make one kind of palm tree.
Mm-hmm.
Not one shade of green. Many, 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 more than we can count. Okay, we've digitalized it and we, say X amount of green and X amount of whatever, color coding thing. But that's just digitalizing or pixelating the data that really isn't pixelated. Or as I also like to tell my students, 2 is approximately equal to 3 for large values of 2 and small values of 3. Depends on whether you round.
And how do they
or
react
truncate.
to that?
Oh, I usually get some interesting looks.
I'll bet you do.
And it's one of the reasons why computers went to binary of on-off, because the original computers that used a base 10 2 was approximately equal to 3, and over time the round-off error became huge, and it still does. And as long as we look, is gas $5 a gallon, or is it $4 and change? How many times do you look at the $18.99 item in the market and say, oh, it's only $18?
Right. Oh, yeah.
We're willing to round down 99. And in those cases, 18 is approximately equal to 19.
Okay.
Which is also approximately equal to 20. Because you're much more likely to pay for it with a $20 bill.
There you are.
And maybe you might not get the penny back.
Well, yeah. If they know how to make change.
Their register will tell them. That's why they get befuddled when you say, oh, let me give you the penny.
Yeah.
And they've already punched it in.
Happened to me the other day.
There was somebody at the register. The bill was like $18.02, and as they were ringing it up, I'd given a 20, and I said, "Let me give you the 2 cents."
Yeah, I'd done that.
I wanted the singles, not a whole bunch of change. And she was like, "Well, I already punched it in." I'm like, "But I want to give you the 2 cents." She said, "I'll have to void it."
That sounds so familiar. Yeah, been there.
Yeah, and making change is a huge piece. Telling time on a clock, a huge thing. People who can't tell time really don't understand what watch your 6 means.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Watch your 6 is about being 6 o'clock, which is behind you. 12 o'clock high. There used to be a TV show or a movie, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
With one of each with that name. 12 o'clock high means in front of you and above you. Those were directions, and they're still... I did many an hour of flying with directions given to me as, at your 1:30, at your 3 o'clock, at whatever.
But what is that round thing that you
Yeah.
had on your wrist for a long time? Can the students even know what that is?
Yeah, because now they've got Apple Watches. Now they've got Dick Tracy watches. Remember Dick Tracy?
Dick Tracy, yes.
He had an Apple Watch, an iWatch,
Yeah, that's true.
because he could video on it. I don't know that he texted on it, but it's interesting to watch. Now you see people doing this, right? They're texting on their watches because it's not polite to have your phone out, but you can have your iWatch. I don't have one, folks.
But if you'd like to, send one to never mind.
There you go. Okay. So, yeah. Happiness is.
So, what else did you discuss in class? This sounds like a great class this week.
It's lifespan development, and gender is LGBTQ identity is part of identity formation. Forming our identities is a huge part of adolescence. Actually, it starts a little bit earlier. Kids start to form their identities pretty much as soon as they start to look at the world and realize it's around. And it's something we're never really done with, but we typically challenge the identities of our parents and either decide to keep, or we decide what pieces of it we're going to keep and what pieces we're going to augment as we hit adolescence. It's tied in with the formation of the prefrontal cortex, which typically is mostly done by the time you hit around 25, which puts a lot of arguments into why insurance companies lower their rates at age 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you and I have talked about even gun control in terms of age 25.
Smart move.
It has to do with the maturity and the ability to understand consequence. A lot better after you're 25. Not everybody's developed that, though. And kids, young people, are defining their identity, how they answer the basic human needs. they're determining how they look at the world and those things that we call maturity. Their reflexes are really good. Their physical prowess really, really good as kids. Wisdom gets better as you get older. Not necessarily important for a fighter pilot, but for most of the rest of us, pretty important. Excuse me. My nose is having one of those tickle moments. So kids are doing that, and part of that development is your gender identity. Whether you choose to be masculine or feminine, man or woman, male or female is assigned at birth. Assigned. It's the little box that the doctor checks when the child is born, and that's why we occasionally hear parents who object to it being done one way or another, because it's assigned at birth, and it tends to be binary. Gender is something much more fluid and much more broad. And then there's orientation, which is a whole different thing. Orientation does not have anything to do with how somebody identifies, whether they want to present as a woman or a man. Right? Gender is how you present. Well, that's gender expression. Gender identity is what which of the roles you feel most aligned with. And orientation is what gets the hormones in your body flying. And that is absolutely not a choice. Hormonal responses happen. If it was a choice, women would not go through PMS. Trust me, it is not fun to be in that position, having lived through those years. Nobody chooses to release the hormones. They happen. It's the body's response to a variety of things. Some of it's incredibly intense. Some of it's transitional. Hormones are just there. They give information to the body. And so orientation is what gets your body excited romantically, physically.
Okay.
People don't choose that. Their bodies have already chosen it. The brains and the bodies function differently in people who are attracted to men and with people who are attracted to women. It's different. And the people who are bi, who are attracted to both, again, a difference. These are physical differences. We can see it. So you don't choose whether or not you have wide eyes or narrow eyes. People are born the way they are. There are things that happen from the time in the womb on that influence some of that development. We don't really understand it well enough. But it is different. It's been well documented. It's not that somebody... Again, nobody's going to choose to take a less popular path unless it really fits with who and what they are. Nobody wants to be abused. Nobody wants to be discriminated against.
Right.
So it's... Yeah. And it's not something new. It's not something new. Been around since forever. They talked about it. Talmud, a document written 2,000 years ago, talks Talmud and Mishnah. Mishnah was written, codified in the first millennia of the Common Era. And it talks about hermaphrodites.
Wow.
So it's a normal, natural part of the spectrum of sexuality, of identity, of all those things. If we could get to the place where we could embrace it and recognize that God makes all of us, and not all of us are foxtail palms or cardboard palms or coconut palms.
Mm-hmm.
We are what we are.
It's funny, I got my first email from someone who identified, kind of the he, what is it, she, and then...
The different pronouns.
Yeah. And there's like slashes after each one. And I'm thinking, I've never seen that before.
It's been quite common. The reform movement has embraced the giving your pronouns in a number of different ways and places for a number of years now.
Really? Okay. I just never seen it.
And they also require new synagogues to be built with a non-gendered, a gender-open bathroom, so that they're inclusive. Because God made all of us. And society defines what is a female role and what is a male role. Yeah. The one, we don't change, obviously, who makes babies. That's not the point, believe it or not. It's not the point. The point is whether or not you like to do things that are traditionally assigned to women or traditionally assigned to men. There are firefighters who are women.
Sure.
And they do as good a job, sometimes better, than their male counterparts.
Oh, and they have to qualify doing the same
They have to qualify doing the
activity?
same things. Yeah. Same with pilots, right? That's the one near and dear to me. Pilots can fly just as well as women. In fact, anecdotally, when I was a flight instructor, women generally were better early pilots, because myself not included, because they're lighter on the controls. Because we teach women to be lighter on things.
Interesting.
Not because women are, but because we teach them to be.
There was a cool story on CNBC. It was a mom and daughter, Delta pilots. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time that they had ever flown together. And it was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are things that we're going to start to see and have. And it's a great thing. The point that I make with that is that if we disallow 50% of the population in anything, then we are harming our society by not allowing the best. We're not allowing that merit system to work. Mm-hmm. We're not allowing the best of anything to rise to the top because we've put an artificial ceiling in there. And there was an old saying back in the day of women's liberation, would that it would actually happen, which is that men of quality are never bothered by women seeking equality.
True.
So, all right, this has been Rabbi Shafir Lobb. We're coming up on the last couple minutes of the show, and I'm going to ask if you've enjoyed listening to it, and I'm going to guess that you have, since you haven't called in. Either that or nobody's there, and I'm so boring. You can tell me which it is, but I'm going to ask for some sponsors here. We could use some sponsors. If you like hearing the Ask a Rabbi, please call the station, 772-340-1590, and ask to speak to either Greg or Carol, and they'll help you sponsor one or more of these episodes. Get yourself some advertising along the side, too, and I'll talk about a subject of interest to you.
Yeah. And where do we find you?
Find us at www.eitzchayim.org, eitzchayim.org. You can also find us on the Old Folks Place on Facebook, and we'll be in other social media soon. Services tonight at 7:30, and more information coming soon.
All right.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's helped make this possible.
Coming soon to TikTok.
Aye, that is the one, isn't it? TikTok's what everybody's on.
That's it.
Got to boil it down to just a few minutes of video. We'll do it.
WPSL Port St. Lucie.